Like it or not, Miss Whitaker, you're staying. Matteo DeLuca's voice cut through the glass-walled office like a knife drawn slowly from velvet, and in his right hand, between the black onyx signet ring of his family and the cuff of a $12,000 suit, he held the pink and white pregnancy test that had vanished from Evelyn Whitaker's private bag that morning. Evie sat frozen in the leather chair across from his marble desk, one soft, heavy hand pressed low against her stomach, her pale face burning as two bodyguards in black suits blocked the office doors, and the entire Chicago underworld seemed to shrink down to that tiny plastic strip. "That baby is mine," Matteo said, not loudly, not cruelly, but with the kind of certainty that made armed men stop breathing. Evie did not look at the test first. She looked at the envelope beneath it. The cream paper bore the DeLuca crest, but the wax seal had been pressed too hard, smeared on the left edge, as if someone had worn Matteo's ring without knowing how he used it. The detail was small enough to disappear under fear, humiliation, and the sound of rain striking the 47th floor windows. But Evie Whitaker had survived 5 years in DeLuca global logistics by noticing the things powerful men believed were beneath them. The room wanted her to shrink. The chair was too narrow, the desk too high, the silence too expensive, and every polished surface reflected her large body back at her, as if the building itself were asking how a secretary like her had ended up here. She had spent years learning how to move through hallways full of men who looked past her until they needed a flight rerouted, a signature found, a meeting erased, or a lie made clean on paper. Now those same men were watching her stomach as if it were evidence. Matteo leaned forward, dark eyes locked on hers. Behind him, the city glittered cold, and far below, the docks he controlled blinking red through the rain. "You were leaving," he said. It was not a question. Evie's throat tightened, but she kept her chin lifted. "I was going home." One of the guards gave a short, ugly breath, almost a laugh. Matteo did not turn, but the sound died anyway. His silence was more dangerous than another man's gun. On the desk, beside the pregnancy test, sat her employee badge, her phone, and a folded printout of the private medical appointment she had never entered into the company system. A slow chill moved through her. Matteo saw the change in her eyes before she could hide it. He missed nothing. That was what made him terrifying. But he had missed this. He thought the test meant betrayal, leverage, a secretary trying to run with the air of a mafia king inside her. Evie saw something worse. The appointment time on the printout was wrong by 11 minutes. Not enough for a stranger to notice. Enough for the woman who built Matteo DeLuca's entire calendar with her own hands. She looked from the paper to the signet ring, then to the guard standing on the wrong side of the security camera. Her fingers curled over her stomach, not in surrender, but in protection. Matteo's eyes narrowed. "What are you looking at?" Evie swallowed the fear, the shame, the instinct to apologize for taking up space in a room that wanted her smaller. Then she looked at the pregnancy test in his hand and realized with a sick, steady certainty that it had never come from her purse. The pregnancy test had never come from Evie's purse, and the realization struck harder than Matteo's order. Her bag had been locked in the bottom drawer of her desk, beneath payroll folders, shipment manifests, and a spare pair of flat shoes she kept for 12-hour days. Only 3 people had access to the executive floor after 7. Only one security camera watched the secretary station from the correct angle, and the medical appointment on the printout was wrong by 11 minutes. Evie kept her hand on her stomach, feeling the small, private future inside her turn into something men in black suits were already trying to own. Matteo's eyes stayed on her face, unreadable, but she could feel him measuring the silence she refused to fill. 5 years earlier, Evelyn Whitaker had entered DeLuca Global Logistics through the service elevator with a thrift store blazer, a college certificate in office administration, and a body every receptionist in the building seemed to notice before they noticed her name. The women in pencil skirts looked her up and down as if she had walked into the wrong marble lobby. The junior executive spoke over her until their flights vanished, their invoices misfiled themselves, or their private dinner reservations failed to appear. Then they learned to say please, not because they respected her, Because Evie remembered everything. She remembered which dock's supervisor lied when he was nervous, which union lawyer smelled like expensive gin at noon, which board member always changed meetings after calls from block numbers. She remembered Mateo's calendar 6 months back without opening a screen. She remembered the way his onyx signet ring pressed wax cleanly, centered and deep, never smeared. Most people thought secretaries kept coffee hot and doors closed. Evie kept empires from tripping over their own secrets. That was why the printout terrified her more than the pregnancy test. Whoever had taken it had not simply searched her things. They had known where to look, what to steal, and how to place it in Mateo's hands before she could breathe. Across the room, one guard shifted his weight. His jacket opened half an inch, revealing the matte black grip beneath. Evie noticed because she always noticed. She also noticed the tiny red blink of the office camera above the bookshelf had gone dark. Mateo followed her glance. Nothing in his expression changed, but the room lost another degree of warmth. "Leave us," he said. The guards did not move. For one sharp second, even the rain seemed to stop against the glass. Evie's pulse beat once, slow and heavy. Men ignored secretaries until the secretary knew which orders were real. Mateo turned his head barely. The onyx ring caught the light. "I gave an order." This time the guard stepped aside, but the taller one looked not at Mateo. He looked at the dead camera. Evie saw it. Mateo saw her see it. Then the private phone on his desk rang, a line that only 3 people in Chicago were supposed to have, and Mateo did not reach for it. He looked at Evie instead. The private phone kept ringing, each pulse cutting through the office like a warning buried under silk. Mateo did not answer it. He watched Evie watching the dead camera, the guard who had hesitated, the pregnancy test on the marble desk, and the smeared DeLucas seal. Then, with one slow movement, he touched a button beneath the desk. The glass wall behind him darkened from clear to black, hiding the rain-slicked Chicago skyline and the red lights of the docks below. Evie felt the room change from office to cage. Not a cheap cage, a billion-dollar one, built from marble, surveillance, black suits, and men who killed without raising their voices. The phone stopped. A second later, every screen on the far wall came alive. Shipping routes, container numbers, private elevator feeds, Doc Camiras, union manifests. DeLuca Global Logistics was not a company, Evie realized for the 1000th time. It was a kingdom wearing a corporate logo, and Mateo DeLuca ruled it from behind a desk no jury would ever see. He reached for the phone only when it rang again. "Speak," he said. The voice that answered was smooth, male, and controlled. "Mateo, secure the girl. Bianca Caraway is already in the building." Evie's stomach tightened. Bianca's name moved through the room like perfume over poison. Every woman on the executive floor knew Bianca Caraway. Blonde, polished, born rich enough to treat cruelty like good breeding. The kind of woman magazines called inevitable. The kind of woman men expected beside a DeLuca heir. Mateo's expression did not shift. "Who opened my private line? Silas?" There was a pause. "Short. Too short for innocence." "Emergency protocol," Silas Vane replied. "The board is nervous. A secretary with a pregnancy claim is not a private matter." Evie felt the words land before anyone looked at her. A secretary, not Evie. Not the woman who had built half the calendar that kept their illegal empire from bleeding into daylight. Just a soft-bodied inconvenience sitting too close to Mateo's name. One of the guards stared at the floor. Another watched her stomach. Mateo noticed both. He noticed everything now, but not fast enough to undo the way the room had already judged her. Evie folded her hands together to stop them from shaking and let her eyes move over the screens. Loading Bay 7 was active, though no shipment was scheduled until midnight. Elevator 3 had been held on the executive level for 6 minutes. The camera above her secretary station was still dark. 3 wrong details, all small enough to survive in a building where fear did most people's thinking for them. "Miss Whitaker," Mateo said, and the sound of her name in his mouth made every guard stand straighter. "Do you recognize that manifest?" He turned one screen toward her. "Not a rescue. A test." Evie lifted her chin. "Yes." Her voice was quiet, but it did not break. It was canceled yesterday. Mateo's gaze sharpened. Before he could ask why it was moving again, the private elevator chimed. The doors opened on the far side of the office, and Bianca Caraway stepped out in white silk, smiling at the pregnancy test on Mateo's desk, as if it were a dirty glass someone had forgotten to clear. Bianca Caraway stepped out of the private elevator in white silk, smiling at the pregnancy test on Mateo's desk, as if it were a dirty glass someone had forgotten to clear. The room changed around her. Guards straightened. The dark screens glowed behind Mateo. Evie sat between marble, black suits, and the tiny plastic strip that had turned her body into a boardroom crisis. Bianca's eyes moved over her slowly, not with surprise, but with satisfaction, and Evie understood the cruelty of it before the first word landed. Bianca had not come to discover the secret. She had come to display it. "Oh, Mateo," Bianca murmured, stopping beside the desk. "You should have called me before letting payroll gossip become a bloodline problem." No one laughed, but the silence was worse. It made room for every hidden judgment in the tower. Evie felt the eyes on her stomach again, on the way her navy blouse stretched when she breathed, on the soft heaviness of her body in the leather chair. She kept her hands folded over her middle, not hiding it, protecting it. Bianca picked up the folded medical printout with 2 manicured fingers. A secretary with access, a convenient little test, and suddenly she thinks she belongs upstairs. Her smile sharpened. "Sweetheart, men like Mateo do not build dynasties with women who look like they wandered in from the filing room." The words hit clean and public. Not just her body, her job, her class. The invisible years she had spent keeping doors open for people who would never say her name unless something went wrong. Evie's cheeks burned, but her spine stayed still. She did not give Bianca the satisfaction of lowering her eyes. Mateo's face became perfectly blank. That was the first warning. Even the guards seemed to feel it. One shifted away from Bianca by half a step. But Mateo did not strike, did not shout, did not save Evie with some grand declaration. He only watched, and that restraint was almost more terrifying than rage. Bianca placed a slim folder beside the pregnancy test. The top page bore the DeLuca crest. Silas prepared emergency containment. Medical leave. Security escort. Full non-disclosure. She can be comfortable somewhere quiet until the claim is handled. Claim. Evie's fingers tightened once over her stomach. "I'm not signing anything," she said softly. Bianca tilted her head. "No one asked you to." One guard reached toward Evie's employee badge on the desk, and Mateo's voice stopped him cold. "Touch it and lose the hand." The room froze. Bianca's smile flickered, then returned thinner. "Sentiment is dangerous, Mateo." Evie heard the word beneath the word, weakness, but her eyes were no longer on Bianca's face. They had dropped to the folder, to the routing stamp beneath the crest, to the tiny sequence of numbers in the lower corner. Loading Bay 7. Elevator 3. 11 minutes off. The same wrong time. The same dead camera. Mateo uncapped a black pen, the onyx ring flashing as his hand moved toward the document. Evie saw the trap, close before anyone else did. The black pen hovered above the containment order, and Evie saw the trap close in the shine of Mateo's onyx ring. Loading Bay 7. Elevator 3. The dead camera. The medical appointment printed 11 minutes wrong. They were not separate mistakes. They were breadcrumbs laid by someone confident everyone in the room would stare at her body, her job, her shame, and never look down at the numbers. Mateo's signature would not only send her away. It would authorize movement through a dock route that had been canceled the day before under emergency bloodline protocol, with Evie's name buried inside the paperwork like cargo. "Don't sign that." Her voice was quiet, but it cut cleaner than Bianca's cruelty. The pen stopped. Every guard looked at her, as if the furniture had spoken. Bianca laughed once, polished and sharp. "How sweet. The secretary thinks she gets to review DeLuca emergency orders now." Evie stood. It was not graceful in the way Bianca was graceful. It was something heavier, steadier, impossible to ignore. The leather chair creaked behind her, and her hand stayed over her stomach as she moved around the desk, not shrinking from the black suits or the marble or the woman in white silk. I reviewed every routing authorization in this building for 5 years, she said. That stamp is wrong. Bianca's smile froze at the edges. Sit down before you embarrass yourself. Evie did not sit. She reached for the folder, but not the way a thief would reach. She touched only the lower corner with 2 fingers, careful, precise, pointing to the tiny sequence beneath the DeLuca crest. That number belongs to a canceled refrigeration manifest from loading bay 7. It was voided yesterday at 4:19 p.m. Because the container failed customs inspection. A guard shifted. Another looked at the screen. The room, which had been breathing with judgment a moment ago, went airless. Mateo's eyes moved from Evie's face to the document. Continue. One word. A test. A warning. Permission, but not trust. Evie swallowed the ache in her throat and kept going. If you sign under emergency containment, the system treats me as protected medical transfer. But the dot code routes the escort through freight access, not private security. Her finger moved to the next line, and the elevator timestamp matches the printout on my appointment. 11 minutes wrong. Bianca stepped closer, perfume cold as glass. She is inventing nonsense because she got caught. No, Evie said, looking at Mateo now. Someone wanted you angry enough to sign before you read. The words changed the room. Not loudly, not dramatically. Worse, they made sense. Mateo's hand lowered, the black pen touching marble with a soft click. His silence spread outward until even Bianca seemed trapped inside it. Evie reached for the pregnancy test, the little pink and white strip that had been used to turn her into a scandal, and placed it beside the routing stamp. This wasn't found, she said. It was delivered. Bianca's mouth opened, but Mateo raised one hand. Nobody breathed. He looked at the dead camera, the frozen manifest, the guard by the door, then back at Evie as if, for the first time, she was not sitting in his office. She was reading his empire back to him. Everyone out, Mateo said. Then his eyes stayed on Evie. Not you. The room emptied in layers of fear. First, the guards stepped back from the doors, their hands no longer resting near their jackets. Then Bianca moved, slower than she wanted anyone to notice, her white silk whispering over the marble as Mateo's stare followed her to the elevator. Conference room, he said without raising his voice. No phone, no visitors. Bianca's smile tried to survive the order and failed. Mateo, you cannot seriously be taking her word over mine. He looked at the containment order, at the pregnancy test beside the false doc stamp, and then at Evie. I am taking the numbers over your panic. The elevator doors closed on Bianca's face. Only then did the office breathe again. Evie remained standing, one hand on the marble desk, the other curved over her stomach. The humiliation had not left her. It sat under her skin, hot and bruised, but something else stood beside it now. The terrible awareness that she had stopped a mafia boss from signing away her life with 2 fingers and a memory. Mateo did not thank her. Men like him did not soften that quickly. He picked up the pregnancy test with the same hand that wore the onyx signet, turning it slowly under the office lights. You said it was delivered. Yes. To make me angry. To make you careless. His eyes lifted. That answer landed harder than flattery ever could. He set the test down and pulled the folder closer, scanning the line she had pointed out. Evie watched him find the pattern in silence. The canceled manifest, the emergency transfer code, the dead camera, the elevator hold, the private line. His jaw tightened once. It was the only visible sign that something inside him had shifted. Not trust, not tenderness, recognition. The kind one dangerous person gave another when they realized the quiet one had seen the knife first. Who else knows you were pregnant? He asked. Evie's fingers pressed lightly into her blouse. My doctor. Me. And whoever broke in my desk. Not Silas. I never told Silas anything personal. Bianca. Evie's mouth almost curved, but there was no humor in it. Bianca does not ask women like me questions. She makes decisions about what we deserve. Mateo looked at her then, not at her stomach, not at the chair she had been placed in, not at the scandal others wanted her to become. At her. The silence stretched, black and expensive. Behind him, the screens flickered through feeds of docks and elevators, but his attention stayed on the woman in front of him. "You should have come to me." The words were cold, almost an accusation. Evie's eyes flashed. "You had 2 armed men blocking the door and my private medical record on your desk. Do not pretend I was wrong to be afraid." For the first time, Matteo DeLuca did not answer immediately. The onyx ring tapped once against the marble. Soft, controlled, dangerous. Afraid of me? Afraid of what men do when they think a woman is evidence instead of a person. The sentence hit the room and stayed there. Matteo's gaze darkened, not with anger at her, but at the truth he could not dismiss. He reached for the desk phone and pressed one button. Lock down executive access. Pull every camera from 7 to 7:30. And find out who used my seal. A pause. "No one touches Miss Whitaker." Evie stiffened. "I'm not your prisoner." Matteo's eyes returned to hers. "No," he said. "You're the only person in this tower who saw the trap before I signed it." The private elevator chimed again before either of them could move, and this time the screen above the desk showed Silas Vane standing alone in the corridor, smiling directly into the dead camera. Silas Vane smiled into a camera that was supposed to be dead, and the expression was not fear. It was invitation. Matteo's hand moved once beneath the marble desk, and the office door sealed with a low hydraulic thud that made Evie's pulse jump. The private elevator froze before it opened. On the screen, Silas lifted one gloved hand and held up a small cream envelope stamped with the DeLuca crest. The wax seal was smeared on the left edge. Evie felt the shape of the trap tighten around her ribs. Matteo saw the envelope. Then he saw Evie see it. "You want me to chase him?" Matteo said. "No," Evie answered, her voice still soft but steadier than she felt. "He wants you to leave me alone in this room." The silence that followed was sharper than a gunshot. For the first time, Matteo did not look offended by being corrected. He looked interested. Dangerous men hated being told they had missed something, but Matteo DeLuca was dangerous because he could survive the truth. His gaze cut to the pregnancy test, then to the dark camera above the bookshelf, then to the hallway feed where Silas waited with patient arrogance. "My security floor has been compromised," he said. "You are coming with me." Evie's hand tightened over her stomach. "Coming where?" "Somewhere he cannot reach you." That is not an answer. One of his brows lifted slightly. Men in his world did not hear no often. Men like him heard fear, bargaining, begging. Evie gave him none of those. She stood in the center of his black glass office with her blouse still wrinkled from humiliation, her cheeks still warm from Bianca's contempt, and her eyes fixed on the man who thought protection and possession could share the same name. "If I go with you," she said, "I keep my phone, I keep my badge, and I see every document before my name is used again." Matteo's jaw tightened. The onyx signet caught the light as his hand closed around the pregnancy test, not crushing it, not hiding it, just holding the first piece of evidence like he finally understood it could cut both ways. "You negotiate under threat." "I schedule men who lie for a living," Evie said. "Threat is just another appointment." Something almost moved across Matteo's face. Not a smile. Too cold for that. But the room shifted anyway. He opened a lower drawer and removed her phone and badge, sliding both across the marble toward her. "You do not leave my sight. You do not make me disappear." This time, he answered immediately. "Agreed." The word landed like a lock turning, but not around her wrists. Around the shape of a temporary alliance neither of them trusted yet. Matteo came around the desk, close enough that Evie caught the scent of rain on wool and expensive smoke. He did not touch her. That mattered more than any apology would have. He only angled his body between her and the elevator feed, a silent wall in a black suit, then pressed 2 fingers to his earpiece. Private route. South lift. No lights. The bookshelf behind his desk split open without a sound, revealing a narrow passage washed in red emergency glow. Evie looked at the hidden corridor, then back at the screen where Silas's smile had vanished. The compromised camera flickered once, and a new message appeared across the feed in white letters. "SG doesn't make it to the garage." The words on the screen burned white against the black feed. as she doesn't make it to the garage. For one heartbeat, every route in Mateo's tower seemed to collapse into a single narrow red corridor behind the bookshelf. Evie felt fear rise fast and metallic in her throat, but she did not move backward. Moving backward was what men like Silas counted on. Mateo's hand went to the pistol under his jacket. Evie's went to her employee badge. Wait. He turned on her, eyes dark enough to stop weaker people from speaking. Not now, Miss Whitaker. Especially now. Her voice shook once, then steadied. If he knew the South Lift route, he didn't guess. He read your emergency protocol. And if he read that, he knows where your men will run when you panic. The word panic struck him like a slap, but he did not deny it. Outside the sealed office, the hallway camera flickered again. Silas was gone. Bianca's conference room feed was empty. A chair lay overturned, white silk abandoned over the back like a shed skin. Mateo swore under his breath. Evie stepped closer to the monitor, her large body filling the red glow of the hidden passage, one hand protective over her stomach, the other gripping her badge hard enough to whiten her knuckles. She was not fast like a runner. She was not sharp like a blade. She was steady, planted, impossible to erase from the center of the room. Pull a freight access, she said. No, Mateo, if you take me through the route he named, I'm dead. If you take me through the route you think he doesn't know, I'm still dead. Pull up freight access. His jaw flexed. Then he touched the panel. Screens changed. Loading Bay 7 appeared, sterile and gray under security lights. A black medical transport van waited beside a canceled refrigeration container. 2 men in DeLuca security jackets stood nearby, but Evie had scheduled every certified medical transfer for the past year. Those jackets were wrong. The left sleeve carried last season's patch. Small, invisible to anyone who did not live inside details. They're not yours, she said. Mateo went still. How do you know? Because your real medical escorts changed insignia after the March audit. Silas signed the memo. He expected you to look at guns, not stitching. The room went silent. Even the hidden corridor seemed to hold its breath. On another screen, Bianca reappeared near the freight elevator, phone in hand, face pale with fury. She's moving the board call up, Evie said, reading the calendar alert that flashed on the corner monitor. If I disappear before that call, I become scandal. If I arrive alive with the routing logs, Silas becomes treason. Mateo looked at her then, not as cargo to guard, not as a frightened secretary to drag behind him, but as the only person in the tower still reading the battlefield correctly. Tell me where to go. The command should have sounded impossible from a man like him. Instead, it sounded like the first crack in the wall between control and trust. Evie pointed to the old service corridor on the map. Laundry lift. It bypasses freight and garage, but only if someone holds the manual fire door from the inside. Too exposed. For me, yes. She lifted her badge. Not for them. They think I'm still sitting in your office. Before Mateo could stop her, Evie crossed to the marble desk and placed the pregnancy test beneath the dead camera, directly in view of the restored internal feed. Then she slid Mateo's onyx signet ring off the forged envelope where it had left its smeared twin in wax and set the real ring beside it. Evidence and authority side by side. A trap for the people watching. The hallway feed sparked alive. Silas's voice came through the speaker, colder now. Very clever, Miss Whitaker. Evie stood her ground, broad shoulders squared, stomach protected, eyes fixed on the camera. No, she said, just tired of being mistaken for something easy to move. The freight elevator doors opened on screen, and the fake guards stepped out with weapons drawn. And Evie did not flinch. On the monitor, their black jackets and outdated sleeve patches looked convincing enough to fool a frightened executive, a rushing bodyguard, even a mafia boss trained to count guns before stitching. But not her. Not anymore. Mateo stood beside her, close enough that the heat of him pressed against the air, yet he did not pull her behind him. He waited because she had told him to wait, and that single act of restraint changed the entire war. Freight access is live, Evie said, her voice low. Let them enter under the false emergency code. Mateo's eyes never left the screen. And then, Evie lifted her badge to the reader beneath his desk. The green light flashed over her name, Evelyn Whitaker, Executive Access. Then the system records who they really answered to. The freight elevator sealed behind the fake guards. Every screen in Mateo's office shifted at once. Loading Bay 7. The conference room. The board call Bianca had tried to move forward. Silas Vane's private corridor. His forged authorization. The smeared wax seal. The canceled refrigeration manifest. The medical transfer code with Evie's name hidden inside like freight. All of it appeared in cold blue light across the wall, not as rumor, not as pregnancy scandal, but as evidence. Bianca's face drained of color on the conference feed. Silas stopped smiling. Mateo looked at the images for one long, silent second, and the silence was worse than rage. Then he touched his earpiece. Take them. No shouting. No theatrical fury. Just 2 words, and the DeLuca Tower answered. Real security moved from the old service corridor Evie had chosen, cutting across the fake guards before they reached the garage. The men in false jackets dropped their weapons without a shot fired. Silas tried to step backward, but the doors behind him locked with the same soft hydraulic sound that had trapped Evie hours earlier. This time, the cage was not hers. Bianca's voice cracked through the conference speaker. Mateo, this is absurd. She is manipulating you. Evie felt the old wound stir, the one Bianca had carved open with white silk and a smile. A secretary with access. A woman from the filing room. A body too visible for the bloodline she carried. But the pain no longer made her smaller. She stood in the red glow of the hidden passage, broad shoulders steady, one hand over her stomach, the other resting beside the pregnancy test and the onyx signet ring. No, Evie said. I documented you. The room went still. Mateo turned toward her, and this time he did not look at her like evidence. He looked at her like the only person in his empire who had seen the knife before it touched his throat. By midnight, the underworld had gathered where Bianca had planned to humiliate her. The executive boardroom of DeLuca Tower, all smoked glass, black marble, velvet chairs, and men who had once looked through Evie when she brought contracts to sign. Silas stood between 2 guards, stripped of his phone, his title, and every route he had sold. Bianca sat pale and furious at the far end of the table, her family's alliance frozen on the screens behind her, every account tied to the forged medical transfer and the canceled container. No one whispered now. No one laughed. The pregnancy test lay on the center of the table, sealed inside a clear evidence sleeve. Beside it rested Mateo's onyx ring. The same 2 objects that had been used to accuse Evie now condemned everyone who had touched her life without permission. Mateo rose. The room obeyed before he spoke. Silas Vane is no longer DeLuca. A guard removed the family pin from Silas's lapel. Mateo's gaze shifted to Bianca. Bianca Carraway's alliance is void. Her access to this tower, my docs, my accounts, and my name ends tonight. Bianca's mouth trembled. For her. Mateo did not look away. Because of her. Then he did what no one in that room expected. He picked up the onyx signet ring, crossed the marble floor, and stopped beside Evie. He did not force it onto her hand. He placed it on the table in front of her, an offering of authority, not ownership. Evelyn Whitaker saw treason where my soldiers saw protocol. She protected my child, my house, and my empire when all of you were busy judging whether she belonged in the room. His voice lowered, deadly and clear. From this moment forward, she does not ask permission to stand here. Evie felt I turned toward her, but this time the weight of the room did not crush her. It recognized her. Mateo looked at the guards by the door. Any order carrying her name carries mine. One by one, the men who had ignored her bowed their heads. Not to the secretary, not to the scandal, to the woman Mateo, DeLuca, trusted with the future of his bloodline and the keys to his empire. Evie placed her hand gently over the evidence sleeve, over the first small proof of the child everyone had tried to use against her. Then she lifted her chin, soft, heavy, unhidden, and finally impossible to move. The glass walls reflected her standing beside Mateo beneath the chandelier, not behind him, not beneath him, but at his right hand, where the whole city could see her.